What's up guys, it's Justin Romine here, videographer, filmmaker based here in Dallas, Texas, and I'm gonna start a new series of videos that are based around beginner level tutorials for people just getting into filmmaking. One of the reasons I'm doing this is I have a buddy named Kostas who is the owner of Opa Greek Taverna in Rowlett, which is a suburb of Dallas, that he's super into videography like I am. And there's things that I'm finding out that aren't so clear to him even though he watches tons of YouTube videos online of how to become a better filmmaker, how to grow in a skill, what camera to get, etc. So this video specifically, as you can tell by the title, is going to be based around how to set up Adobe Premiere before you even start editing. How to set everything up, what's the foundation, how do you set up the sequence, how do you import the footage. So if this video seems like it might be a little scaled back for you, then you can click away, that's cool. Maybe you like how I set things up, which might be a little bit different than what you do. So maybe see what I do and see if it might help. One thing that I use is an external hard drive because as you can see from my Mac, I only have 121 gigs. I use an external because I keep all my files on that because I definitely have way more than 120 gigs worth of footage. All right, so first off what I do, you open the SD card, you find the files. On a Mac, I also sort by kind because it does have all these, the XML for the camera, like the camera settings so that you can play everything back. Then I create a folder. This one's, I'm gonna call the Bayou Ball because I filmed this event. And then I go through all the footage. I hit Shift and click, and that selects everything. Then I drag all the footage over here. This is 26.86 gigabytes worth of footage, so now we wait. All right, man, that took a little longer. Whenever you move files to an external hard drive or upload files to an external hard drive, it always seems to take a little bit longer. Can't wait for that iMac. So first off, what we do is we open up Adobe Premiere Pro. So you always want to start with a new project. So you go new project, you title it, and then you always want to make sure you know where you're saving it. So this one I'm going to save in that same folder that I created. Boom. Click OK. And there we go. We have Premiere open. I always close. This is my normal editing workflow, is I have the project and the effects and all that down in the left-hand corner. I have the source file, Lumetri scopes, effect control, all that up here. The actual sequence will go over on the right-hand side, which is what I'm actually creating. And then the timeline for that sequence is gonna be below, so this is where I'll actually edit. I two-finger click down here in the project bin, and I go to import. Because I saved the file right in that folder, it pulls up all the files already. I click the first one, hold Shift down, click the last one. That will select all of them. Click import, then we wait for it to import. All right, cool. So now that I have the project files imported into my project, this is where a lot of people get confused. Some people tell you, oh, just drag and drop it onto your timeline and that starts the sequence. I don't like doing that. I like actually setting up my sequence. So I go to File, New, Sequence. So this is gonna pull up the different presets that are already set. Mine is preset on is AVC HD and at 1080p at 24 frames a second. Do your sequence in 24 frames a second if you are going for that film cinematic look. Now, if you're going more reality, 30 frames a second, it's fine, you can export in that. But I would not export in anything over 30 frames a second. Label my sequence, click OK, and boom, you see how it sets up your sequence directly. Now, you can see over in the project panel, you can see all the different files, right? Right now it's categorized by frame rate. So there's all my 59.94, so 60 frames a second. And you can see in this, for this project, all I filmed in was 60 and then 24 frames a second. Next, what I do, I set up a bin. So I click on the bin and I type in B-roll. So this is where I would put all my B-roll content. So for this case scenario, I'm gonna take any of my B-roll that I shot in slow motion, which is in 60 frames a second. I scroll down, I select all of that, and then I'm going to drag that into my B-roll bin. And then I can do another bin and say B-roll 24, And then I select all my footage that was shot in 24 frames a second, and I put that in that folder. So now, look how much organized that is. Now I can easily go between slow motion B-roll and 24 frames a second B-roll. Next, this is a crucial step in setting up your project before you edit any footage. What you want to do is take any of the footage that you shot in any other frame rate besides 24 and interpret that as 23.976 or 24 frames a second. So I select on all my 60 frames a second. So click the first one, scroll to the bottom, shift, select. So that selects all of them. Then on a Mac, I two-finger click, right-click on Windows, modify, interpret footage, assume frame rate of 23.976, hit enter. And just like that, all that footage is interpreted as 24 frames a second. This is important because you don't want to put a 30 frames per second or a 60 frames per second footage on a 24 frames a second timeline. You want the timeline to match the footage settings. Now what that's going to do is for the 60 frames a second, it's automatically going to be about around 55% slow motion. Then if you want to speed that up from there, you can by using the rate stretch tool or right click, two-finger click and do speed duration and speed it up that way. But you never want to put on a 60 frames a second file on a 24 frames a second timeline. You want all your sequence settings to match the footage. And from there, I just start editing. And that's gonna conclude this tutorial. I hope y'all found this helpful and I hope you learned something. It's always good to learn from other creators to see what they're doing because maybe it might be different than your workflow. And especially for beginners out there, I highly encourage you to keep watching tutorials. I almost completely learned off of YouTube alone and then self-trial and error. So it is possible. So just keep learning, keep growing. And if you could, drop me a comment below. Let me know, how do you set up your project in Adobe Premiere? I know it's important. I know everybody does maybe something different, but how do you set up your project? I look forward to hearing from you and answering any questions you might have. We'll catch you in the next video.